Have you ever agreed to wear something for just one evening, believing no one would remember it the next day? That was exactly what I thought when I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, holding a simple navy blue dress that wasn't mine. I kept telling myself it was only part of a harmless plan to make our first date unforgettable. What I didn't know was that before the night ended, I would discover a version of myself I had spent years trying not to notice. The strange part wasn't that someone asked me to dress differently. The strange part was how natural it felt once I finally stopped fighting it. If you've ever wondered why some moments completely rewrite your future, stay with me, because every choice I made that evening led somewhere I never expected. My name is Ethan, and until that weekend, I lived a completely ordinary life. I worked during the day, spent evenings gaming, wore the same jeans almost every day, and never cared much about fashion. My wardrobe was practical, predictable, and honestly boring. Then I met Lily through a mutual friend. She was confident without trying too hard, funny without forcing jokes, and she noticed things other people ignored. We talked online for weeks before deciding to meet in person. Our conversations felt effortless, and for the first time in years, I was actually excited about a date instead of nervous. The afternoon before we met, she sent me a message that made me laugh out loud. "I have one condition," I replied. "Now I'm curious." "You have to trust me." I smiled at my phone and answered, "Depends on what it is." "You'll find out when you get here." Every part of me expected a surprise restaurant or maybe a themed cafe. Nothing could have prepared me for what actually happened. When I arrived at her apartment, she greeted me with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Instead of immediately leaving for dinner, she invited me inside. The living room looked cozy, filled with warm lights, plants, and soft music playing quietly in the background. Everything felt comfortable, almost calming. "I need your opinion on something," she said. She disappeared into another room and came back carrying a large garment bag. "I've been working on a styling project," she explained. "Would you help me test it?" "What kind of project?" She unzipped the bag. Inside hung an elegant knee-length dress in deep navy with delicate silver details. Next to it were matching heels, jewelry, and a small makeup case. I stared without saying a word. She watched my reaction carefully. "I'm not making fun of you," she said softly. "I just think you'd be surprised by what you see." I laughed awkwardly. "You seriously want me to wear that?" "Only if you're comfortable. I've never done anything like this." "I know. I wouldn't even know where to start." She smiled. "That's why I'm here." There was no pressure in her voice. No challenge. No teasing. Just kindness. That made saying no unexpectedly difficult. She wasn't asking me to pretend to be someone else. She was inviting me to experience something completely unfamiliar. I hesitated for several minutes. What if I look ridiculous? "You won't." "What if I can't stop laughing?" "Then we'll laugh together." "What if someone sees me?" "We're not leaving until you decide you're ready." Her confidence slowly replaced my fear. Finally, I nodded. "Okay." The smile on her face made me realize how much trust that single word represented. She handed me the dress. "The bedroom's right there." Holding the fabric felt strangely different than I expected. It was softer, lighter, and carefully made. As I closed the bedroom door behind me, my heart raced faster than it ever had before. I looked at myself in the mirror wearing my usual clothes one last time. "This is ridiculous," I whispered. Then I started changing. The jeans came off first. Then the t-shirt. As I carefully slipped into the dress, I struggled with the zipper before finally managing to pull it closed. When I turned toward the mirror, I froze. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it also wasn't ridiculous. The dress fit better than I expected. My posture changed almost automatically. The way the fabric moved made me stand differently without even realizing it. I opened the bedroom door slowly. Lily looked up. She didn't laugh. She didn't act surprised. Instead, she smiled warmly. "I knew it." "Knew what?" "That you'd see it." "See what?" The confidence hiding underneath all those oversized hoodies. I looked down at the dress again. I don't understand why this doesn't feel as strange as I expected. Because sometimes we're uncomfortable with new experiences only until we actually experience them. She invited me to sit in front of a large mirror. "If we're doing this," she said, "let's do it properly." She explained every step before touching anything. She showed me how skincare creates a smoother base, why lighting matters when applying makeup, and how subtle changes often look more natural than dramatic ones. Instead of rushing, she treated the whole process like an art lesson. I learned how blending mattered more than adding extra product, why choosing colors that complemented skin tone made a huge difference, and how confidence often came from small details rather than bold transformations. After applying a light, natural look, she handed me the brush. "Your turn." "I'll ruin it." "No." I've literally never done this. Everyone starts somewhere. With shaky hands, I copied the techniques she had shown me. The first attempt wasn't perfect, but each correction taught me something new. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I found myself genuinely interested in learning. Then came the wig. She adjusted it carefully, explaining how positioning changed the overall appearance. She brushed the hair gently, tucked a few strands behind one ear, and stepped back. "Now look." I slowly lifted my eyes toward the mirror. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. The reflection wasn't someone else. It was still me, just presented in a completely different way. I noticed details I had never paid attention to before: my posture, my expressions, the way confidence could completely transform someone's appearance without changing who they were inside. For the first time in my life, I wasn't staring at the mirror searching for flaws. I was simply curious. And that curiosity would lead to the most unforgettable first date of my life. I couldn't stop looking at the mirror. Every time I thought I had adjusted to what I was seeing, another detail caught my attention. The soft way the wig framed my face, the subtle makeup that highlighted features I had never noticed before, and the dress that somehow encouraged me to stand taller instead of hiding behind crossed arms. I expected to feel embarrassed. Instead, I felt curious. That surprised me more than anything else. Lily watched quietly from behind me without interrupting my thoughts. "So," she finally asked, "what do you think?" I smiled nervously. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. "What did you expect?" "To laugh." "And I can't." "Why not?" "Because it actually looks nice." She grinned. "It looks natural because you're not pretending. You're just allowing yourself to experience something different." I took one more look before turning away from the mirror. "I still don't think I could walk outside like this." She nodded. "That's completely okay." She wasn't disappointed. She wasn't trying to convince me. That made me wonder why I was the one continuing the conversation. "What if we just drove somewhere?" She raised an eyebrow. "You mean outside?" I didn't say I would get out of the car. She laughed. "I'll take that as progress." Before leaving, she showed me something I hadn't even considered. "Walking in heels isn't about speed," she explained. "It's about balance." She demonstrated first. Short steps, relaxed shoulders, looking forward instead of down. Then it was my turn. The first few steps were awkward. The second attempt felt slightly better. By the fifth try, I wasn't wobbling nearly as much. "You're improving already." "I still feel like a baby giraffe." "Everyone does." She explained how posture changed everything. Shoulders relaxed, chin level, arms natural. Instead of focusing on the shoes, I focused on moving comfortably. Little by little, the nervousness faded. I wasn't trying to imitate anyone. I was simply learning something new. Then she handed me a small purse. "What do I need this for?" "You'll see." I laughed. "You planned all of this, didn't you?" "Maybe." The evening air felt cool as we stepped outside. Every sound suddenly seemed louder. Every passing car made my heart race. What if someone recognizes me? They're probably too busy thinking about their own lives. But what if? She interrupted gently. "Take one breath." I did. "Now look around." People were walking dogs. A couple was talking near a cafe. Someone was carrying groceries. No one was staring. No one even looked in our direction. For the first time that evening, I realized something important. Most of the fear existed only inside my own imagination. We got into her car. She smiled. "Still okay?" "I think so." "You can tell me to go home at any moment." Instead of answering, I fastened my seatbelt. She started driving. The city lights reflected across the windows, creating soft colors that made everything feel almost unreal. We talked the entire drive. Not about clothes. Not about makeup. About music. Movies. Childhood memories. Favorite foods. It felt exactly like a normal first date. The only difference was what I happened to be wearing. Eventually, she parked beside a quiet park overlooking a small lake. There aren't many people here this late. I looked outside. The path was peaceful. A few lights reflected on the water. "Wanna walk?" I hesitated. Then I nodded. The first step outside felt terrifying. The second felt manageable. The third felt surprisingly normal. I kept expecting someone to point, laugh, or stare. Nobody did. A couple walked past us without even slowing down. An older woman smiled politely as she continued her evening walk. Two teenagers were too busy laughing at something on a phone to notice us. It felt strange. The fear I'd built inside my head simply wasn't happening. As we walked beside the lake, Lily asked a question that stayed with me. "When is the last time you tried something that genuinely scared you?" I thought for a moment. I honestly can't remember. Maybe that's why today feels so important. She wasn't talking about the dress anymore. She was talking about growth. About stepping beyond familiar limits. We found an empty bench overlooking the water. The city lights shimmered across the surface like tiny stars. She handed me a small compact mirror. "One more look." This time, instead of analyzing every feature, I smiled at my reflection. Not because I suddenly believed I looked perfect, but because I looked relaxed, comfortable, happy. That expression had been missing for a long time. "You know what I noticed?" I asked. "What?" "I've smiled more tonight than I have in months." She smiled back. "That's the version of you I hoped you'd meet." For several quiet minutes, we simply watched the water. No pressure. No awkward silence. Just peace. Then she surprised me again. "You know why I suggested all this?" "I assumed you liked fashion." "I do. But that's not the real reason." "What is?" "The first time we talked online, you apologized before almost every opinion you shared." I frowned. "I did. You'd say things like, 'This is probably stupid,' or 'You probably won't agree.' I realized she was right. I guess I do that." "You've spent years shrinking yourself." Her words landed harder than I expected. Tonight wasn't about becoming someone different. It was about giving yourself permission to stop hiding. I looked down at my hands. Everything suddenly made sense. The clothes weren't the lesson. The makeup wasn't the lesson. Confidence was. Trying something unfamiliar without immediately judging myself was. Learning instead of assuming was. As we started walking back toward the car, I noticed my steps had changed again. The heels no longer felt impossible. The dress no longer felt unfamiliar. Even holding the small purse felt natural. Without realizing it, I had stopped thinking about what everyone else might see. I had started paying attention to how I actually felt. And somehow, that changed everything. The drive back felt completely different from the drive there. Earlier, every mile had been filled with questions, doubts, and nervous laughter. Now the silence was comfortable. I wasn't staring out the window hoping nobody would notice me. I was watching my own reflection in the glass, wondering why I had spent so many years believing confidence had to fit only one version of myself. Lily glanced over and smiled. "You're thinking." "I am." "About what?" "I keep asking myself why this feels so normal now." She nodded. "That's usually what happens when fear finally runs out of excuses." Her words stayed with me the rest of the drive. When we reached her apartment, she unlocked the door and turned on the warm lights. Everything looked exactly the same as it had a few hours earlier, but I didn't feel like the same person who had walked in wearing jeans and a hoodie. She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "I figured we'd earn these." I laughed. "I definitely earned mine after surviving those heels." She smiled. "You didn't just survive them. You walked pretty confidently by the end." I looked down at the shoes. I didn't even notice. Exactly. We sat on the couch, talking for what felt like hours. The conversation slowly shifted away from the date itself. Instead, we talked about confidence, about how people often spend years trying to become someone society expects instead of discovering who they already are. I admitted something I had never told anyone. When I was younger, I used to wonder what different styles would look like on me. She listened without interrupting. I never told anyone because I thought they'd think I was strange. And now, I think I was mostly afraid of being judged. She smiled softly. Fear can be very convincing. It tells us people are watching when they're not. It tells us we'll fail before we've even tried. It tells us one mistake defines everything. She wasn't lecturing me. She was describing exactly what I had experienced all evening. After finishing our drinks, she stood up. One last lesson. I laughed. There's more? She walked toward the mirror. Confidence doesn't end when the makeup comes off. I followed her. She handed me a makeup remover wipe. You do it. Carefully, I removed each layer exactly as she had taught me. Foundation disappeared. Lip color faded. Mascara came away. Then the wig. Finally, I was standing there looking like myself again. Or, at least, the version of myself I had always known. She looked at me through the mirror. What do you see? Myself. Only yourself. I paused. No. What else? Someone who's less afraid than he was this afternoon. She smiled. That's the transformation. It wasn't about appearance. It never had been. The confidence I felt while wearing the dress hadn't magically disappeared. It stayed. That realization surprised me more than anything. Over the next few weeks, Lily and I continued seeing each other. Sometimes we'd go for coffee. Sometimes we'd visit bookstores. Sometimes we'd spend an evening experimenting with colors, hairstyles, fabrics, and different outfits simply because learning together was fun. She never pushed me. She never expected anything. If I wanted to learn something, she taught me. If I wasn't comfortable, we skipped it. That trust made every new experience easier. One afternoon, she challenged me again. This time you're doing everything. Everything. The outfit. The makeup. The accessories. The hairstyle. No help. I laughed. You're serious? Completely. At first I doubted myself. But then I remembered every lesson. Preparation before rushing. Small improvements instead of perfection. Confidence before comparison. Nearly 2 hours later, I walked into the living room. She looked up from her book. For several seconds, she didn't say anything. Then she slowly stood. You didn't need my help. I remembered what you taught me. No. She smiled proudly. You understood it. There was a difference. Following instructions was one thing. Developing confidence was something completely different. We spent the afternoon taking photos, not to post online, not for attention, but simply to document progress. Looking through them, I noticed something unexpected. The biggest difference wasn't the outfits. It wasn't the makeup. It wasn't even the hairstyle. It was my smile. In the earliest pictures, it looked uncertain, careful, almost apologetic. In the newest ones, I looked relaxed, comfortable, happy. That confidence carried into every part of my everyday life. At work, I stopped apologizing before sharing ideas. I volunteered for projects I normally would have avoided. I stood straighter during meetings. I made eye contact instead of looking down. Friends even started asking if I had changed gyms or started exercising because my posture looked completely different. The funny thing was, nothing physical had changed very much. The biggest transformation happened in my mindset. Months later, Lily and I returned to the same lakeside park where our first date had taken place. The weather was almost identical. The lights reflected across the water exactly as I remembered. We sat on the same bench. She smiled. Do you remember what you said here? I laughed. I probably said a lot. You said you couldn't believe how natural everything suddenly felt. I remember. So, she looked at me curiously. If you could talk to the version of yourself who stood in front of my bedroom mirror that afternoon, what would you say? I didn't answer immediately. I looked across the calm water, remembering every nervous thought that had raced through my head before that first step. Then I smiled. I'd tell him that confidence isn't something you buy. It isn't something someone gives you. It grows every time you stop letting fear make your decisions. Lily reached over and squeezed my hand. I think he'd be proud of you. Maybe she was right. Because when I thought back to that first message she had sent, "You have to trust me," I finally understood what she really meant. She wasn't asking me to trust a dress, or makeup, or heels. She was asking me to trust myself. And that simple first date didn't just give me an unforgettable memory. It taught me that exploring new styles, learning new skills, and expressing yourself with honesty can reveal confidence you never knew was there. Sometimes the biggest transformation isn't becoming someone new. Sometimes it's finally allowing the real you to step into the light without fear. That first date didn't change who I was. It changed how I saw myself. And once that happened, nothing would ever look the same again. The weeks turned into months, and something unexpected happened. I stopped measuring my progress by how convincing a look appeared in the mirror. Instead, I measured it by how confident I felt trying something new. Some weekends I practiced simple, everyday makeup. Other weekends I experimented with different color combinations, hairstyles, and outfits just to understand what suited me best. I even started keeping a small notebook where I wrote down what I learned after every practice session. Which foundation shade blended naturally? Which fabrics felt the most comfortable? Which heel height allowed me to walk confidently? Every small lesson built on the one before it. One Saturday morning, Lily walked into the room while I was organizing everything. "What are you doing?" I smiled. "Making mistakes on purpose." She laughed. "I need an explanation. If I only wear outfits I'm already comfortable with, I'll never improve." She looked around at the neatly arranged clothes, shoes, brushes, and accessories. "So today is practice day?" "Exactly." She nodded proudly. "I think you've officially caught the fashion bug." I wasn't chasing perfection anymore. I was enjoying the process. That was the biggest difference. As my confidence grew, I also became more patient with myself. The first eyeliner wasn't perfect. The first hairstyle took forever. Matching accessories still required trial and error. But instead of getting frustrated, I treated every mistake like a lesson. I realized that confidence doesn't come from never making mistakes. It comes from knowing that mistakes are temporary. One evening, Lily surprised me with a small gift box. "You don't have to open it now." Of course, I opened it immediately. Inside was a silver bracelet with a tiny engraved message. I held it close enough to read. "Be brave enough to be you." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. "It's beautiful." It reminded me of you. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I fastened the bracelet around my wrist. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't flashy. But it became the most meaningful accessory I owned because of what it represented. Months later, I found myself helping someone else. A mutual friend quietly admitted they were curious about exploring fashion but were too nervous to even begin. I smiled because I recognized that exact fear. Instead of overwhelming them with advice, I simply told them my story. I explained how terrified I had been before my first outfit, how convinced I was that everyone would stare, how wrong I had been. Then I shared the same lessons Lily had taught me. Take small steps. Practice without rushing. Choose comfort before complexity. Focus on confidence instead of perfection. Most importantly, don't compare your beginning to someone else's years of experience. Watching someone else gain confidence reminded me how far I had come. That evening, after they left with a genuine smile, Lily looked at me. "You know what just happened?" "What?" "You became the person you needed on your own first day." I thought about that for a while. She was right. Growth has a funny way of coming full circle. The things we struggle to learn often become the lessons we're best able to share. Exactly 1 year after our first date, we returned to the same apartment where everything had started. The same mirror still hung on the wall. The same chair sat beside it. Even the warm lights looked identical. Lily smiled. "One last challenge." I laughed. "I should have known." She covered the mirror with a blanket. "No looking." "What?" "I want you to get ready exactly the way you want. No second guessing. No asking me. No changing your mind halfway through. And then you'll look." It took almost 2 hours. I chose every piece carefully. A soft burgundy dress that felt elegant without being overdone. Simple jewelry. Natural makeup. Comfortable heels. Nothing dramatic. Nothing exaggerated. Just a look that felt genuinely like me. When I finally finished, Lily uncovered the mirror. For a few seconds, I simply stared. Not because I looked dramatically different, but because I looked comfortable, relaxed, confident. A year earlier, I had searched the mirror for reasons to doubt myself. Now I searched it for reasons to smile. And I found plenty. Lily stood beside me. So, what do you think? I smiled without taking my eyes off the reflection. I think I finally understand. Understand what? The first date never changed me. She tilted her head. It revealed me. She smiled wider than ever before. Exactly. On the drive home that night, I realized something else. The most unforgettable part of our first date wasn't the dress. It wasn't the makeup. It wasn't learning to walk in heels. It wasn't even seeing myself differently in the mirror. It was meeting someone who believed in me before I believed in myself. That belief gave me the courage to take one small step. That one step became another, then another. Eventually, those tiny moments created lasting confidence. Looking back now, if someone asked me what changed my life forever, my answer wouldn't be clothing, makeup, or fashion. It would be trust. The willingness to explore without judging myself. The courage to learn without worrying about being perfect. The confidence to discover that self-expression isn't about fitting into someone else's expectations. It's about finding what feels authentic to you. Our first date didn't rewrite my identity overnight. It opened a door I had never allowed myself to walk through. Everything that happened afterward came from choosing curiosity over fear, growth over doubt, and confidence over hesitation. So, if you've ever been curious about trying something new, learning a different style, or simply expressing yourself in a way you've always been afraid to explore, remember this. You don't have to change who you are to discover another side of yourself. Sometimes all it takes is one safe opportunity, one supportive person, and one brave decision. Because you never know which ordinary day will quietly become the moment you remember for the rest of your life. For me, it wasn't a holiday. It wasn't a birthday. It wasn't an achievement at work. It was simply our first date. And it changed my forever.